NewsNation's Kellie Meyer joining us live from the White House, along with Kevin Hassett, the director of the White House National Economic Council. Kellie.
Yeah, thanks, Marnie, and thank you, Kevin, for joining us. I want to start out with what Marnie was just talking about, the rare earths and minerals deal. I'm curious, this is something that the president was saying he hopes to get some return on investment, so to speak, of the billions of dollars, the U.S. taxpayer dollars that went into helping Ukraine in its war against Russia. How much is he expecting to get back from this joint funding venture with Ukraine?
Right. Well, there have been a lot of estimates, but I think that a ballpark estimate of what it's worth to the American people is around $20 billion. But it's worth way more than that, because I think the president's vision is that not only will it help us with our national security to have the critical minerals, which are so important for putting, computers together and everything else, but also if there's U.S. ownership in those places, that it'll help secure those places, because you, of course, wouldn't want to be attacking U.S. things. And so I think that having some U.S. ownership is a way to ensure U.S. attention to the space that would hopefully help keep the peace once a peace hopefully happens.
And do you know what that return on investment might look like in terms of what that would mean for the American people?Uld it mean paying off deficit, or would it mean paychecks back to the American people?
Oh, it would be revenue that would go in and reduce the deficit.
Okay.
But also that could end up being used to cut taxes or other things, depending on how else we're able to save. And again, if you look at the savings that Doge with Elon Musk are finding, it's really quite possible that we're going to be able to cut people much bigger tax cut checks than people anticipate, just because there's so much savings in the budget.
I'm sure many Americans will be watching out for potentially a paycheck in the mail with that. I want to ask you as well about tariffs. A lot of talk about that. The president just putting out a post on Truth. We could show that here too, talking about March 4th, Mexico, Canada, those tariffs going into effect, as well as the 10% on China. The concern here, and we saw the consumer confidence report, the lowest, in 4 years. Folks are concerned about how this might affect their pocketbooks, their grocery store costs, egg prices. What do these tariffs mean for everyday Americans back home?
Right. Well, what's going on right now is that President Trump is focused on solving the fentanyl problem. And the fentanyl problem really is related to 3 countries. So China makes the precursors, ships them to Mexico and Canada, and then in Mexico and Canada, they load it up into fentanyl, and then they ship it across the border. And the progress that has been made so far that we get briefed on was not as impressive as the president hoped. And I think that's why he took the action that he did.
So eventually they may see a pullback on these tariffs if they start to see the progress being made.
And the fact that the tariffs are in place doesn't mean they should stop trying, because if the president introduces tariffs again in April 2nd, he's talking about, then the tariffs that are in place now will be on top of whatever else happens to other countries. So he's very serious.
And you're talking about those reciprocal tariffs then coming on April 1st.
And then whatever is on now is going to go on top of that, because he's so adamant that we solve the fentanyl crisis.
And then again,
correctly so.
And of course, addressing the fentanyl crisis is something the president wants to do. But what about the effect of those tariffs then coming back on the American people in terms of what their grocery store costs are, the cost of eggs going up? What does this mean for everyday Americans at home?
Well, the tariff revenue is very substantial. And that tariff revenue then creates space for us to return money to the American people through tax cuts. And so when you're thinking about the tariff, don't think about just what's happening when I'm buying a good, but also like what happens to how much money I get. And so if I give you a bigger tax cut and fund it the tariff, then are you worse off or better off? As like for the individuals, we think most people are going to be a lot better off.
And this is a discussion you were mentioning before we came on air. You were talking with Johnson, Thune, folks here at the White House yesterday you were having meetings with. Can you talk about what those discussions look like? Were you talking about those potential tax cuts for Americans?
Right. So we had a meeting in the Roosevelt Room yesterday with the Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House, and then Crapo, the Senate Finance Chair, and Jason, the House Ways and Means Chair. And we started to lay out a roadmap for getting from the excellent progress that we've made over the last week to a final bill. And the point of having that meeting in the White House was that we wanted, along with our Leg Affairs Director, James Braid, to make it clear to everybody, what the president's priorities are. And now they're going to go out and they're going to achieve, a political equilibrium that accomplishes the president's goals, but also satisfies their members. And that's what they're out working to do. And we're planning to have those meetings, the ones that we just had in the White House, regularly in the next, almost every week or two. But we're going to rotate where they are so that we don't always make people drive across town.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.